Once I was offered the opportunity to be present at the birth of a child. Afterwards, I was so proud of myself. In my still then young mind, I did it all. To this day, I boast in my performance that afternoon. Almost as if it could not have happened without me. It was my help that made that happen. Maybe this is one more reason why priests should get married. I quickly learned that the one who deserved the applause and the support really was Mama. And a good dad knows that. Not just then, actually, but all along the way of raising those little kids. We males only are let into the process because Mom shares with us what it was like, what it is like to be pregnant, to give birth, and the days after. And a good dad steps back to applaud her, He knows that. Then the process he was allowed to share more and more often along the way in that process of raising those kids. A dad is oftentimes playing second fiddle to Mom during almost the entire pregnancy. He comes in a far second, actually, those days. And like I said, he only experiences that pregnancy through his wife. There are exceptions along the way of raising those kids and certain times in childhood development when it's not true, but largely, I have to say, as I watch little kids grow up in their homes, largely it's Mom. It's Mom who's the go-to for the kids, who's the go-to when the kids are bereft and wailing, even in college. How often a student tells me how they call home and Dad answers and quickly hands the phone off to Mom. It can be humbling indeed, and there's many a dad I've talked to over the years who talk about how letting go that is to see the kids run to Mom instead of them when they're in crises, when they're in need. It's a humbling thing for them oftentimes. Sometimes they're relieved. But I would say it again, dads take second place often along the way. I asked a dad before Mass just this morning, what are his plans for Father's Day today? He said, I'll be home all day, and with a smile added, hoping somebody stops by. Even on Father's Day, you know the stats better than I on Mother's Day and how Mother's Day cards sold every year, how many are sold every year versus how many Father's Day cards are sold every year. You know better than I how empty restaurants are on Father's Day relative to Mother's Day. Even this Mass, Mother's Day is packed with moms. The sanctuary is full of moms coming up for a blessing, but the crowd on Father's Day is as thin as their hair. But don't feel too sorry for them. Don't feel sorry for them because of the fact that they are by and large a little more ignored, definitely, than moms. Because I propose to you, maybe that is as it should be. Because you see, God is humble. We're often exalting God, praising God, lifting God up. God, we say, is always being praised and thanked. But what we seldom think about is the humility of God. The humility of God, the truth that God plays second fiddle to all of our lives on purpose. God plays second fiddle to your life So we don't tend to ever think really about the humility of God. And on this Trinity Sunday, when we celebrate the mystery we call God, we witness the mystery of God, the Godhead emptied in all humility into flesh, and then emptied out even more into us and into all creation. For our sake, emptied into us for our sake. No one need bow to this God, because God was and is and always will be bowing to us. And to all creation. As a matter of fact, God bends down low to each person, each of us, in love and in our suffering. God is deferential. God is always deferential for us. Always invisible, behind the scenes, always behind the scenes in our lives, not needing our attention. God doesn't need our attention, not needing anything really from us, really not needing anything from us. The idea of a God who is humble might be a new one for us to think about. But it is underlined again and again in the writings of St. Francis and Bonaventure and the Apostle Paul and many, many others. Our triune God does love all the time, whether thanked or not. It's what God does. And God's not going to hold back love if we're not praising and thanking and giving glory all the time and bowing and scraping before him, her, or it. Seriously, God has no need of our praise at all. If we choose to give God attention, if we choose to be mindful of what God is doing for us all the time, that is for our sake. Really, truly, it's for our sake. Not for God's, that we pay attention to him, that we wake up to him, that we thank him. That's for our sake, not for God's. This is the humility of God. God's always in the background of our lives, working for us all the time, not needing our thanks or recognition or anything to do what God does, because God is just doing what God does, which is to love us all the time. Neither do our dads at their best. Neither do our dads at their best. That was my dad. He was such a simple man of few needs really, who did his best to be a good dad, the best way he knew how. All for us, for my mom and my brother and myself, all for us. His whole life was for us. In many ways, almost invisible, working full, long days at a job he didn't like at all, really. And never once whined that we didn't pay enough attention to what he did for us behind the scene. Never once did he need our attention to that. Not once did he need to be thanked for it. Many was the Father's Day. I would see my dad come forward at the blessing time after the homily, as we will do this morning. He came here periodically during the year with my mom while she was still alive, and then for 30 years afterwards, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, he'd make his way down from West County to join us here. Even when he couldn't drive, my brother would bring him. He never needed here to be seen as Gary's dad. He never needed to be seen here as Gary's dad so people would pay attention to him. He just wanted to be a dad who deferred to his kids. He always deferred to his kids and to his wife. Always he deferred to his kids and his wife. And I might add, he didn't need the limelight. He didn't need the attention. No need for recognition. Happy only, and I mean this, happy only that I was happy. My dad did not ask much in life. He did not need much attention. Even in his death, he died so humbly. Later on today, when I make my way to the cemetery, for that I will be very grateful. On this feast of the Holy Trinity, this feast of the humility of God. The humility of God deserves some attention. It deserves to be underlined, not for God's sake, but for ours. And especially for the sake of my brothers, all you men of the church. The humility of God deserves to be underlined just cause. Just because. It shows us the true nature of God that we don't think about very often. And the true nature of a good dad. No wonder Father's Day is ignored, at least relative to Mother's Day. Because a good dad always defers to his kids and to their mom. Like God. Thank you, God, for our dads. Thank you, dads, for our God.